Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Steel and Whiskey. My name's David Zabka, and I have with me here today Luke Faulkner. Luke Faulkner is with the AISC, and your title there is Director of Technology Integration. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Well, welcome, Luke. Glad to have you with us here today. Always a pleasure. So, Luke and I will be talking a lot about steel here today, the industry, a lot of technology talk, I'm sure. But the other most important part of steel and whiskey, of course, is the whiskey part. So, I picked up this whiskey. Town Branch is the name of it here. So, I picked it up a little bit of a whim the other day. I was at a big liquor store here in town. It's actually a converted Toys R Us. So I couldn't tell you the name of the store. It's just called Liquors R Us now, since it's the converted Toys R Us. So yeah, it's they have quite the selection. You can about imagine how big it is if it's a old
Like
Toys
Toys
R
R
Us.
Us.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's full circle from when you were a kid and like had a beg and scream to go to Toys R Us, and now the grown up beg and scream and run into the store yelling.
Yes. The problem is I don't have a parent to regulate when I go in there, so that can be kind of a problem.
Adulting, right?
Yeah, it's hard for sure. So what do you got there, Luke? What are you drinking on today?
I have E.H. Taylor. This was a gift from my brother-in-law for a combination of being a godfather and doing some manual labor. So he found a bottle of that. It's kind of hard to find, and I've been dying to try some. And he's been hounding me for about 2 months now. Have you tried it? Have you opened it? Have you tried it? It was like, I don't want it. I'm like saving it. This is hard to, it's hard to find. So he called me last night bugging me, and I said, I actually have the perfect occasion.
Yes.
Perfect excuse for this. So I'll open it. I told him I would open it for this.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad this can be the occasion that you choose to open it and use it. So cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what the Town Branch would be like, but pretty smooth. I like it. It's good. So, yeah, very good.
Good.
So Luke, let's talk a little bit. You've been with AISC for quite some time now. I've been here with SDS2 for a while. You've been with how long? You been with AISC?
Oh, like a couple decades now.
That long? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It'll be 18 years in April.
Wow. Okay. So a while.
A lot of change. Yeah.
What? So how'd you get to this point? What was your background before that, and what made you or what interested you about AISC? How'd you get here?
There were a kind of a confluence of things. I was a project manager when I was right out of college, when I was just a young buck, and had started to, as you can imagine, I started to get a little burned out on that. I knew I still liked construction though, and I had some previous like intern level experience at industry associations, trade associations. And I just happened to, it was a complete whim, I just happened to see this position at AISC. I was in a different industry, I was in the piping industry, but by virtue of being like the youngest guy in a really small office, I was the technology guy. And that was how it worked in like the early 2000s. It was, you didn't have a dedicated, VDC manager or anything. You just had like, okay, the young kid can handle it. So I got familiar with implementing the software systems we had, and got familiar with some of the technology that was coming in the industry. And this position at AISC kind of presented itself to me, and I said, hey, that sounds kind of cool. So we were, I was really excited for that. We were working with CIS2 at the time, and we were using terms like EDI that, meant something different than it means now. Like the phraseology has obviously changed. But we were working with all these things I thought were just like the coolest, and I never talking about all these software standards back in the day, I had never thought we'd get to where we are now, where you're like dealing with mixed reality and extended reality, and people are asking questions about AI. It's the technology landscape has changed and expanded quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's amazing how quickly it changes now. So you talk like 18, 20 years ago, the pace at which it changed and advanced, that has certainly, it's much faster now. It changes at a much faster pace than it did then. So it's not only way more advanced now, and we've made leaps and bounds over the last 2 decades, but now we're changing at an even faster pace.
We are seeing, I think probably 6 weeks ago or so, a colleague asked me about Chat GPT, and I didn't know much beyond what most of us know anyway. I mean, we were kind of limited to what we knew from the headlines. And I told him I don't know. I've read and I've heard it's not, it's maybe not quite there, but it's doing some cool stuff. And I mean, 6 weeks and a couple iterations later, and seemingly every office in the country is looking at how they can implement some level of this. Like, a few weeks ago, it was a chat bot, and we were like, yeah, it's cute, but is it really going to do this? And now we're like, all right, it's going to take notes for me. It's going to be pretty cool, and it's going to make presentations for me. And the evolution is certainly accelerating.
Yeah. And the thing about that is, what really drives that is data, right? Data and information. So that thing is going out and it's searching and learning and understanding all the data that's available. But a human could never do that in 10 years or a year, whatever it's doing in 30 seconds, what would take a human 10 years to do, right? Yeah.
It's
And
remarkable.
It really is. And then it's just going to get better and better, and probably at a quicker pace, because it's every time somebody uses it, it's more data to collect and use and gather and that. So
it's correct.
Kind of like a compounding effect, right?
It is. And I'm hoping we can, when I say we, I mean our industry, I'm hoping we're getting much better. We've made leaps and bounds about how we manage and collect our data. I hope we can keep improving. I think if we probably benchmarked ourselves against other industries, we would probably say we're still not, we still don't meet some of our peers in how well we collect and manage our data. But we've gotten a lot better. And data is what's going to drive that. Any AI is going to need a rigid, good set of data to really advance, and boy, could we use it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back a little bit here to the director of technology integration there with AISC. So tell us a little bit about what that means. Like, what is the intention of that position for the AISC, for the industry? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Yeah, like broadly speaking, the best way I kind of summarize it is to say that where the structural steel supply chain can intersect or touch technology is probably an area that I'm looking at, or having to consider some sort of initiative, or try and at least stay up on some of that. So I mentioned like extended reality, mixed reality, AI. These are all, well, not AI quite yet, but these are kind of initiatives that we look at. Some fall underneath for speed, some other things. Of course, traditionally, I say of course, I don't know if everyone knows. My role was, was kind of the BIM guy, is how it started and evolved. Like anything that involved software standards that would enable model sharing, or would enable data exchange, that would enable kind of, I guess you'd call it e-commerce, although maybe it's more like enabling e-commerce. But the role kind of started somewhat compact with those things, and has just continued to evolve. And it's been kind of cool, because I get to work with I used to be fairly isolated in that role, probably understandably so. And that means I've gotten to, more interaction with more teammates at AISC, in research and engineering, education, whatever it might be. It's crossing more and more, technology is crossing more and more boundaries and touching more and more things now. So it's really, it's a quite wide purview. Day to day, it's probably like a lot of other people's jobs. You're in, you're taking calls and you're on meetings, you're interacting with other, there's other industry groups that we try to, either strategically stay involved with so that they understand the value that structural steel can add, via our ability to use the industry's ability to use technology or leverage technology. There are groups that we stay involved with to work on certain standards. There are initiatives that we're working on or trying to plan out. I travel a lot on behalf of the industry, going to different meetings, conferences, summits, whatever it may be, to both, work on technological aspects and the little like nuts and bolts of what we're doing, and also to kind of proselytize for structural steel. So, more recently, you might be surprised to hear I've been working on a lot of conference stuff.
Well, that makes sense.
We have a little conference coming up in a couple weeks. So you should come check it out.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? We might be there. So I don't know. Maybe we'll get a big old booth or something.
I'll send you some info on it.
Well, he's talking about NASCC, of course, right? So yeah, that's coming up here in just a few weeks from the time of this recording. So it's Charlotte this year. I'm looking forward to getting out to Charlotte. Should be a good time. So
it's going to be a very good time.
Yeah. Always is. Always learn a lot. Always have good conversations at NASCC, and yeah, always a good show. So that's a wide range of responsibilities and things for you to do. I'm sure it's got to be exciting though, right? Because you're always on the forefront of what's coming. So that's got to be exciting, right?
Exciting, intimidating, sometimes unsettling. I was talking about how quickly AI, Chat GPT and other obviously Google's looking at that too with Bard and whatnot, how quickly that's evolving. It's no different anywhere else. We were talking about, for years, how to automate the structural steel fabrication process. And it seemed like almost overnight, we started to see robotic assembly and welding stations and fabrication shops. It just it feels like these went from pipe dreams to reality like so quickly. So that part of it is so cool, but also really it can be hard to even imagine what's coming next.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I've learned you can't ever say, well, we'll never do this. That is, it's changing so quickly.
Yep. Yeah. Again, that just goes by, the Chat GPT thing and data and, how quickly we evolve. We've been talking about that for a while already. So yeah, it's just, and we kind of saw the same thing here from the SDS2 standpoint, a technology provider. It was, you mentioned the robotic welding in the shops. It was just like somebody flipped a switch and all of a sudden all these fabricators were installing welding robots, and we're getting calls, to how do we work with SDS2? What do we got to do to make this work? We got this new machine. How do we feed it data? So, luckily, we are in a position where we've always got to try to be on the forefront of that technology also, and be looking at what's coming, what's new. So a lot of times, software, you see things in software. A lot of times we'll come out with new stuff and people kind of look at it and go, well, yeah, so what? I don't need that. But you don't need it today. 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, you're going to be happy that we had it in there, and we're proactive about, you know, staying up with technology and
Right.
trying to predict the future. Nobody can predict the future, but we do our best, right?
Well, the workforce is changing so quickly as to, you know, especially how comfortable they are with certain amounts of technology. It is,
Hmm.
you know, I mean, I think probably, you know, a later Gen X, you know, we're pretty comfortable with technology, but the degree to which, you know, I don't want to call them kids, but like recent grads are
Hmm.
either high school or college are entering the workforce, the degree to which they're comfortable with technology. I mean, they've never not had it in their life.
Yep.
So I mean,
And
they're gonna ask for it more quickly, and they're
yeah,
gonna ask for it in more areas than we've ever seen,
yep,
and expect and have higher expectations of it, I think.
yep. I think that's a big key to it all. So you hit on a few topics there that I absolutely agree with. So the workforce that's coming in now, they're like the first wave or first generation, if you will, of workforce that's always had technology their entire lives, right? Like
Right.
you and I were fairly close in age, but you know, when we were younger, we didn't have as much technology. Like uh, you know, NES, the original Nintendo, was the extent of the technology
That was everything.
when I was a kid, right? And
That was
then
everything. That was, I
yeah,
mean, that was state of the art. Like everyone knew if someone on the block had one, and you lined up to watch like to watch your neighbor play video games because it was NES. I mean, it was like,
yep. And then that evolved into like Nintendo 64. Did you ever get on the Nintendo
oh yeah,
64?
yeah.
And it was 007. I can't tell you
Hmm. GoldenEye.
how many nights me and my friends were up till 3 in the morning playing GoldenEye on Nintendo 64. So, and
For us, it was Genesis. A lot of Buster Douglas boxing.
yeah, yeah.
A lot of wasted hours there. A lot of wasted hours on Madden when
Oh yeah.
PlayStation came
You,
in. Yeah,
I wouldn't call them wasted. I think they were
not
just, I
wasted.
think it was time setting you up to be a director of technology integration.
Sure, and a you know, and a mildly at times successful fantasy owner, maybe. I don't know.
That's good.
But
So,
I was, I mean, for some perspective, we still, when I was in, you know, high school, like before we had CAD, you know, we were
mhm.
allowed to take some engineering courses, but they made you draw with pencil before you were allowed to do that. So you would, I mean, they
Yeah.
were like the contrast, you know, in the worlds that I've been in, where you have to understand line weights and how to draw the right line weights before we're going to let you do this on a computer so that you understand it. I mean,
Yep.
that was, you know, a world of difference from what is happening now.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I went through the same thing when I was in college. It was a college, they were quite strict on, you know, their process and the way they taught you, and we had the
Oh
same
yeah.
thing. It was we spent, I don't remember how much time it was, but it was just strictly all on the board. You will not touch a computer until you pass these courses and understand the basics. Uh, Funny story. So they made us do lettering sheets. I don't know
Oh
if
yes.
so.
Yeah.
We got, you know, you just an entire, you just open up a book and you just had to write your beautiful lettering on a sheet. Well, I wasn't a big fan of that,
I
so
was terrible at
kind
lettering.
I
Terrible.
oh, it was terrible, right? So I kind of figured out that, well, these lettering sheets are not worth a big chunk of my grade. So I just said the heck with it. I started double spacing and making the size about 1.5 times the requirement. And like I got it done. I would get it done 3 times faster than the rest of my class, but the amount of that grade versus the overall grade of the class was so small that it didn't really affect my grade any, and everybody in my class was all pissed off at me because of the way I figured
Dedicated
it out. But
laziness. You know, give me the lazy person. They'll figure out how to get it done
e-
faster, right? Yeah,
exactly. So yeah.
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
I shouldn't be proud to admit that, but I'll typically also say that B's and C's get degrees. So
Yes, I think I was in that chapter at Purdue
Goodness, yeah,
for
good
sure.
stuff. So a little bit like AISC,
Mhm.
I know recently within probably the last year, one of the technology related things I can think of coming out,
Mhm.
there was a model review guide that
Yeah,
was published, right? I think
yeah,
you were involved with that, along with,
right.
I know some people here at SDS2 were involved with that. Um, Tell me
Some
a
of
little
your
bit about
colleagues were
that.
involved. Yeah, so we had some of your colleagues involved, some of your competitors involved because it's
Yep.
an AISC project, uh, and then some members involved from the fabrication companies. We had some engineers. I I'm hesitant to go into names because I'm going to leave someone off, so I'd rather just leave
Yep.
everyone off.
I
Um,
safe bet there.
if,
Yeah,
if any
safe
of you that worked on this are listening, believe me, I remember you all, but I'm
bet.
just that much intimidated.
Yeah.
Uh, this was, I love this project for a couple reasons. One, model review is something the industry badly needed. And everyone working on this all kind of had this information in their head anyway. And we just needed a way to get it out and show that AISC actually supported this way of working. Our belief, and we've seen a little bit of substantiation as best we can with statistics, is using a model as your review document versus traditional 2D drawings can save you a ton of time. And I mean, I know the crunch we're all in. If anyone's it feels like they're just not spending enough time doing drawing review, I thoroughly apologize. You feel free to keep doing it, but I mean, we build things three-dimensionally. You're using this
Yep.
model as your basis for fabrication. It ought to be what it kind of makes sense that you can look at and understand, the intent here a little bit better if you're using a 3D model. And it just so happens I'll give SDS2 great credit there. I mean, you have a great model review station, and you can use this really well. And really, instead of trying to review a 3D building two-dimensionally, fly around it, understand the connection, cut your review time down, do everything you were doing before anyway, all your
Mhm.
annotations, all your statuses, everything. I love that because that project, because it's something we were really able to control. And I know that sounds like just a little bit cynical, but like, we're able to produce this. We're not reliant on 15 different external factors that may or may not come into play. And we
Yeah.
were able to deliver this to the industry and say, hey, here's a tool that can get you well on the way to using models as a review document. And depending on your skill or how adept you are at it, and depending how big of a project, I mean, you can cut weeks out of out of your review process,
Mhm.
or the project in general. So that was a cool one. I was excited for that.
So, we talked about just the steel industry in general tends
Mhm.
to be a little slow to adopt technologies and such. So,
Yeah.
I feel like even at the model review level, I feel like it's pretty slow to adopt it. In my opinion, there's way too many people still doing traditional
Agree.
paper checking. What do you
Agree.
think is the barrier to them adopting model review completely? What's your thoughts on that, I guess?
The one thing I've tried to tell everyone is it's not technological.
Mhm.
Technologically, obviously you can do everything with a model that you can with the drawing. Some of it's societal, or psychological, or whatever you may call it. Um, it has been slow, but we have, I mean, when you take a step back, we've been kind of promoting this for the better part of a decade,
Yeah.
uh, and there was probably I mean, I will tell you, it was probably under 1% of the industry was using this when we started and didn't know this capability even existed. Um, it is closing in on a critical mass right now, I think. And
Mhm.
this was last year at NASCC. We did a panel session about this, and I was pleasantly surprised there were so many people in the crowd with so many opinions on what else they'd like to see involved in this. Some of it was not necessarily rooted in reality, but Other
Mhm.
parts of it were, wow, there's a substantial crowd here that wants to hear more about this or learn it. There is certainly a generational gap there.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly, probably younger engineers that are learning this from semester one in school are far more comfortable using that. Which is not to say that, like, mid-career and even late career folks are not, but you can, not surprisingly, that a generation that's more comfortable living in a digital world is a little bit more demanding there.
Yeah.
One of the one of the great illustrations I heard of that was Erlene Hatfield. The Hatfield group was talking about this and extolling its virtues and how much she loved it. Boy, this must be, again, 8 years ago, maybe, I can't remember, but she was talking about an argument she had gotten in about a more traditional engineer, we'll say traditional, that it said, I like to have my young engineers really learn how stuff interacts by using traditional shop drawings. They really,
Yeah.
they learn the pieces, they learn the parts, they learn dimensioning, they learn how it interacts with the other members. And, she said, well, that's great, but, when I show a 3D rendering of this giant box girder and have a young engineer say, whoa, that's really big, like, we're actually making a connection with it. So part of it is just doing things the way we know. Part of it is, no matter what, there's always a cost involved in something like that.
Mhm.
There's a learning curve no matter what, and that's time you're not doing something else. So there's always reluctance there, but I think it's actually closing in on a critical mass where that's going to be a necessity if you want to stay competitive.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Very good info.
Yeah.
It always baffles me that we're still in this stage of, I mean, there's a 3D design model. The engineer has that, and then we go to a 2D drawing, and then we go back to a 3D model, and then we go back to 2D drawings again. It's just like, why are we
It's
going
a
from
fine
3D
line,
to
but
2D to 3D? Like, why are we still doing that? And it's it's slowly starting to pick up steam, but I mean, BIM was a topic, that was the hot thing 20 years ago, and we'd be able to share
Mhm.
models and stuff. And then, it's funny to think about us sitting here talking about technology and how rapidly it grows and changes and it is advancing. Yet at the same time, people are sometimes not advancing and adapting fast enough to take advantage of that technology.
It's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very true, and it is. It goes in different pockets. It goes in different industries. I mean, if you were to look at, like, the healthcare industry on the West Coast or some parts of Texas or whatever it may be, I mean, those guys are super competitive
Yeah.
about how quickly they can execute contracts and how well they can coordinate them. Other pockets, not so much. It really is so interesting to see how to see how that kind of falls apart or comes together in different areas and
Mhm.
and different segments
Mhm.
over the course of 20 years even.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, model review, that was something that you guys worked on here the last several
Yeah.
years and had that
Yeah.
guide come out here within the last year.
Yeah.
What's new? What can you tell us that you're working on currently that we might see in the near future?
Yeah.
I know you can't always, probably some things can't always be released out into the wild before it's ready, so I get that. But what can you tell us? What's coming up?
Well, we were just talking about BIM, and it's funny, as I'm thinking about that when we went through all those perspectives, we're due for updates to BIM guide, and we are just like model review. We're working on more companion documents to that to deal with, to kind of it sounds outdated, but to kind of walk people through interoperability and workflow and help them really understand, like, why what is the purpose behind a given model view? Why are you exchanging this? What do you need to look for in this? What are best practices? And that's kind of an outgrowth, really, of the BIM guide. Kind of take a step back. The BIM guide, we decided we wanted to keep it pretty short and tight because there's a lot of textbooks out there, but they're not super accessible. And our idea for how we kind of mature that was we take some of the sections that need more description and more explanation, grow those into companion guides. And that's what we're doing with another, kind of following the process of model review with another couple sections to really hit some of the key components of interoperability and some of the kind of, not just theory, but some of the practical, like why and how are you sharing this and how do you intend to do it and what do you need to look for?
Yeah.
One of the cool things I mentioned was extended reality or mixed reality. We are working on a augmented reality platform with University of Wisconsin, and that's kind of a partnership between technology integration and research at AISC and UW-Madison and a few industry partners. You guys as well, as a matter of fact. I don't know if you. I think you probably know you generously donated some software.
Yeah. So for not everybody knows this. Probably a fairly new, I guess 6 months or so. But I was in support in sales here. I'm on the product management side now. So yeah, I've had a few discussions with the people there at University of Wisconsin working on this. So yeah. I'm excited to be a part of that for sure.
It's a cool project. We're trying to figure out how we can do augmented reality overlays on structural steel that could have quality control applications or could have verification application. There's a lot to work out far down the road, but I mean you could show information, welding information, welding marks. Right now we're trying to verify really how accurately can we do this and how practical can we do this in a way that would actually improve efficiency rather than just showing it actually could work but with a lot of barriers. And there might be from that there might be even more outgrowth. I mean there could be applications for steel erection and training, either in the fab shop or for iron workers, whatever it may be. So that's a really cool one and a really cool area that I'm kind of excited to work on. And then we're what's old is new. I mean, we're still working on our on I guess what you'd call EM11, or the IFC model view for steel fabrication. We're working internationally with some of our partners across the globe. I won't go into the granular detail of IFC, but just to say there are some things we need to backfill there and some things we need to update. And one of the key things we can do is we're never going to be software vendors, but what we can do is ensure that the standards that need to be in place so that communication can happen either from software to machinery or software to software across the chain are in place should someone choose to utilize them. And IFC being what it is very much a worldwide, a well-established, well-used standard for the construction industry.
So, very good.
Still working on that.
Well, that's the great thing about, well, I don't know, great. That's the thing about software and technology, right? Is it's always being worked on, right? So I think
never not keep you busy.
Exactly. So I think some people have this idea or thought that the software is done or the technology is done.
Right?
No, that's wrong. The technology and the software is never done. There's always going to be room for improvement. Somebody's always going to want more. Somebody's always going to, have another problem somewhere that they want technology to solve. So if it was done, if it was perfect and printed money, well, there wouldn't be any software vendors. They'd be just taking all the money for themselves, right? So
I mean, that was a hard lesson I learned when I kind of came into this part of the world from construction. I was like, we just sometimes had to say we're done. Like sometimes, the project just got done eventually. I didn't know, oh, okay, so it's never really done. There's just,
Right.
there's another version.
Yep, that phase or that goal that we wanted to accomplish may be done, but the overall picture is really never done. So,
it's an interesting lesson.
Yep, for sure. So some of those things, like, the EM11, the, AR, VR type of stuff, those are things that I feel like I would say, well, IFC's already been around. We know that's here to stay. We know that's possible. The other stuff is fairly new, probably still not quite super refined, so fairly new. But those are things that are within reach, right? What about other things? Are you looking at things that are like even further up? Like what do you feel that you've looked at that might not be quite within reach yet?
How quickly things change. I mean, a couple years ago, maybe 18 months ago, we were trying to consider if there was an AI project we could look at, either something, something that would lend intelligence to, early design, or something that we could use for application. And really, we were like, we were kind of stumped onto where to start, and if we could really affect that anyway. And that, again, that goes back to data. I was like, without a robust data set, I don't know if that's a starter or a non-starter, but that's certainly one that we have to, been keeping an eye on, continue to keep an eye on, like Chat GPT, or, whenever it's, widely available, BARD or whatever else, will be really good for like certain business processes. I don't know how well and how quickly they're going to adapt. I've seen some already for steel industry, like some welding AI add-ons and whatnot. But I mean, that's going to evolve so quickly. I would like to say there's something we can do there, but I frankly, like, it's a big, tall ask, I think. One of the things that really, that has really kind of stirred the imagination, I think, with some people is exoskeletons. And, we're seeing like the Hilti version of that. What that can do for us is, it remains to be seen. Again, the steel industry, like how robust that would have to be, or how strong that would have to be to have any effect. That might be something that for the time being is like relegated to the realm of drywall, or, electrical conduits or whatever. I don't know if you've seen the thing I'm talking about.
I'm probably not. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but
so there's like a Hilti exoskeleton is probably it's not like the robotic thing from Aliens, but it's it's almost like a backpack that will assist with load.
Got it. Yep. So it's so I can put that in there, and then
take the strain off your shoulders, elbows.
Yep, I can lift 10 times my weight at that point, or whatever. I'm with you now. Yes, I have seen this. Okay.
That's really intriguing to me. That was another one when we kind of looked at this, kind of from a evaluation committee standpoint. We're like, this is really cool. We don't know what our role would, as a trade association. I don't know what our role would be, if it would simply be to work with manufacturers and say, hey, don't forget our industry. Here's where we could use something like this, or this could make us this much more efficient. That is of course really interesting to me. And then it's an old song, but we're still working on Steel XML and trying to make the purchasing and receiving process. Like it's been going on for so long, but that is a very labor intensive, data entry intensive sector. And we just, with any of these, you don't have, what you want to automate is the easiest, kind of dumbest work. And we really don't have the luxury anymore of having a person just do data entry, when we should the data should just enter. So, that's unfortunately one we're still wrestling with a bit.
Again, one of those things that sometimes it boggles my mind of why are we so slow to adopt these things that are going to make our lives easier? And a lot of it's just human nature is to kind of be afraid of the unknown. You're always pretty cautious. So I get it. At the same time, I feel like we're kind of should be over that phase a little bit, but
we work on such thin margins here that there's just not necessarily the room to, change is scary and unknown, and sometimes it's like you got to dance with the devil,
Yeah. Yep.
Or drive the old beater car to work. It gets you there, and the trouble is, the biggest problem is it works.
Right.
There's something that gets you there faster, better fuel economy, and more comfort. But right now, the thing that is outdated still kind of works just enough.
Yep. No,
Yeah.
So being at the forefront of technology, it can sometimes be like you're dragging people along to get them up on this stuff, right? So yeah. Well, so you travel a lot, right? Let's something a little less serious, a little more fun here. So where have you been? Where you been to any interesting places here recently? What have you seen lately?
I've been to this year. I've been to New York for a night, New Orleans for for a conference that just happened to be on like Super Bowl Sunday. That was Impact. What? They did a great show. But it was Mardi Gras month and Super Bowl Sunday. Oh, and Valentine's Day, so that went over really well.
That had to be one heck of a party in New Orleans, huh?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. They still know how to party. I'm going to Rome next week for the ILC Standard Summit. Yeah.
Okay.
So that'll but given like the time of year, how close it is to NASCC, there's not a lot of like flex time in there. So it's pretty much get in, conference, get home.
Yep. That'll be a exhausting flight in a few days, right? Round trip, and with all the time changes and all that, that'll be a rough few days.
This is not a complaint, by the way.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, gosh, if you're traveling that much, going that many places, you must just be they about just like almost let you fly the plane at this point, don't they?
I haven't tried. I don't think I will.
Surely you got to have all the best perks, though, right?
Yeah, give me a couple more cocktails, and I'll tell the pilot what's up.
Let's be careful with that. We don't want to get you in trouble.
Flyer.
Yeah.
My understanding is they pretty much fly and land themselves at this point.
Well, that's my understanding too. I'm no pilot, so I won't speak to it. I've learned that lesson before. If I don't know, I should just be quiet and not pretend that I do. So yeah.
I mean, have you been on a flight lately where the pilots actually announced that like we have to do I didn't know this, but they have to do a manual landing every now and again to either stay qualified or to like calibrate the plane or calibrate the beacons or whatever. But
really,
I had one that was like, hey, just FYI, we're doing a manual landing this time. It's like, there's time. Like, what are you doing the rest of like?
What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, they turn the dial and punch the coordinates, and it's like, all right, cool.
Yeah, and I guess just great example of technology, right? So I mean, like self-driving cars has been the talk for the last couple of years, and be honest, this is an area that kind of scares me a little bit. Like self-driving cars, really? No way. But gosh, I travel all the time too for work, and I've just been sitting on the plane that's been flying itself for how long, and didn't even realize, or so it's.
But it's kind of a good example of like why you don't need to necessarily be afraid. Like you can be aware that like I still want the pilot on the plane. You still want the pilot on the plane. They still have a role, like just like this is gonna with anything, like with any of the other stuff we're dealing with, like you're still gonna need that human input and human brain. It really works well with all this. So like, we're just taking away like some of the dumb stuff, like pointing the yoke. or whatever it might be. I
Yeah.
assume that's what they're doing.
Well, it's yeah. Somebody still has to monitor the computer or the robot or whatever. I mean, like when you go to shops with the robotic welders, it's not like it just sits in the corner and does its own thing and nobody ever checks on it, right? There's always an operator there monitoring that, making sure things are going smooth and
Yeah.
they're machines. They break down, right? So somebody's got to
depending on
be
your-
there to.
Yeah, I mean, and
tend to
depending on your process, you might have a certain amount, or like your capabilities or your staff, like you might have a certain amount of, you know, your throughput might require like a degree of manual welding. Like you might use that and say, this is best for fit up, but it really slows us down if we like possibly if we had this machine doing all the welding, we just need it to tack, and then we hit this with our welders, and while we're
Yep.
doing that, the next one's in fit up. Like that might be your workflow, but
Yep.
there's, you know, like anything else, there's a balance there.
Yeah, I always find that interesting. So you kind of bring up the there's kind of different, specifically with the robotic welding. There's kind of two methods of thought there, right? So one method is I have good fitters, so I'm going to let them fit up, tack weld it, and then we're just going to throw it in the machine and have the machine finish it off. But then there's the other thought of, well, you know what? Let's just have the machine place it all, weld it all fully, and run it out, right? So I always find it interesting, the different approaches that people have taken to the same. It's the same problem, just two different approaches to solve
sides of the same. Yeah, and I mean, depending on it's a really like kind of elegant example of taking technology and like your own skills or your own assets in house and leveraging it. You know, some are, you know, have really good fit up. Some are in need of welders. Sometimes there's a dearth of both. Sometimes there's, you know, an excess of both. But like there's, I've seen the same thing. Like, oh, we really like it for fit up, but like we like to use our own welders, or vice versa. Like, you know, we like to like get a little fit up going and then have the machine do all the welding. So it's really interesting.
Yep. And you could say the same thing about just some of the CNC machines out there. Like I see some shops will have a saw before it runs through their robotic plasma, right? And I always ask them, why did you choose to go with the saw? But then others it's just the robot plasma cutting everything, right? So again, different trains of thought. Most, in my experience, most have expressed, well, we don't want to slow the robot down, or we got to make sure that we're cutting it here and then finishing it here so that it flows smoothly to our fitters. And there's just
I've heard the same thing. Yeah, it's an interesting dance.
It is for sure. So
that is correct. Yeah.
We've been at it here for a little while, so you know, my whiskey's my glass is almost gone. That's not to say I won't pour another one here after we're done, but
I tried to keep it relatively together for this.
Yeah, that's good. Any parting words of wisdom or anything else that you think is interesting that you'd like to share before we go?
No, I would put in another, depending on, you know, when this is public, I would put in another plug for the conference. Since we're both invested in it, really, come to Charlotte. It's going to be a very big conference. It's going to be a really busy conference. We've got the NASCAR Hall of Fame for our conference dinner. It's going to be
perfect.
Yeah. Last year in Denver, like much to their, you know, they did everything they could, much to their credit, and we almost eclipsed our we almost eclipsed our record attendee or registration number.
Well, I didn't realize that.
We came within a couple hundred. Wow. And we were dealing with like the headwinds of, you know, people that either couldn't travel because of company restrictions or weren't comfortable traveling, didn't feel like they wanted to travel because of masking requirements or no masking,
Yeah.
whatever that was. There was spring break. There were all these headwinds, and
Yep.
we still did really well. And I was checking in upstairs on what the registration levels were. They looked like they're going to be, we're ahead of last year. So
Wow. So, what is the record? What is the attendance record?
I think the record, and we go by registrations. I think in person, I think was 5,100. I think that was right before the pandemic. And I think last year in Denver we were in like, I think we were in the like 4,850 or something. We came really close.
Yeah.
I haven't checked for a few days. I say upstairs. That's with my wife Elizabeth, who's the senior director of meetings and conferences. She actually plans the whole thing. So I guess I could have done some homework before and said, hey, can you check the registration for me? But
Yeah.
we were quite a bit ahead of where we were last year. So it's going to be really,
Very
it's
good.
going to be really exciting. Lots of good content.
Well, you know what? Make sure that you tell her thank you and pass along the appreciation, because that can't be a small task to organize that conference. So kudos and thank you to her.
I would be remiss if I didn't reciprocate and say thank you for being such good sponsors and exhibitors year after year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that's a good stopping point. You know, like I said, Luke, as always, great to have you. It's been a great conversation.
Pleasure's mine.
Yeah. Great information that you've shared. You're always full of knowledge and great insight. So appreciate it. And yeah, we will see you in a few weeks in Charlotte.
See you in a few weeks, David.